Welcome to the Medium in the Middle podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie, the Medium in the Middle. On this podcast, I share my journey as a developing psychic medium, as a Reiki master teacher, as an Akashic record practitioner, and anything else that's thrown my way. Hello, Middlers. Welcome to episode 192, where I am following up episode 191, Why I Do Not Offer Mediumship Readings, with episode 192, a super cool mediumship story. So I told you in last week's episode that I had to tell you this story, but I had to tell you why I don't do mediumship first for a job, trade for money. You can't book a session with me. Sometimes it sneaks in. I try really hard for it not to. So this happened and it blew me out of the water. It blew the person receiving the random reading out of the water. And I just had to share it with you all. So that's what today's all about. But we are going to start this week's episode with one announcement. Depending on when you're listening to this, my business numbers and 2024 planning workshop is being held this Saturday on October 21st. So this is for all service-based business owners. If you are in charge of what you can book and do, this is for you to make 2024 your best year yet. If you haven't signed up already, sign up by tomorrow, Thursday, so that you can get all the printables. For everybody who signed up early, you will receive all of the course material early so that you can print it, because you will need a hard copy for the workshop. So sign up as soon as possible so that you can get those printables and be prepared for Saturday. If you can't make it live, it also includes the replay. I just highly recommend writing in your calendar now when you're going to watch that replay, and then get your printables ready for that before you watch the replay. I'll leave the links down below to sign up. All the information is on my website. I'm so looking forward to this workshop. It's going to be so good. Set yourself up for success. No business is too big or too small. You need to know your numbers. You need to plan ahead. What's that saying? If you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. Something like that. Anyways, links down below. And today I didn't really want to pull a card, to be honest, but Spirit was like, yes, pull a card, go on live, pull a card. So I went on Instagram Live. At Medium in the Middle is my only account. Just beware of scammers. I will never DM you. But anyways, I went on Instagram and let everyone vote again. And this week, you voted for the Work Your Light Oracle card deck. And I pulled the card Inner Temple. Devotion. Tune into the portal of your heart. You are being called to be a devoted student and tune into your heart, to incorporate true devotion into your life. You could be being called to develop a regular meditation, journaling, or chanting practice, or to show up to your soul with rhythm. To develop a daily practice where you fill up your well and spend time with your soul. All of the answers to all of the questions that you seek are waiting for you in the portal of your heart, but you cannot hear them unless you carve out time each day to listen. Your soul is yearning for a deeper relationship with you, and so the more time you spend with it and show up to it, the more clearly it will guide you. We are here to grow as souls. Earth is one big playground for the souls to learn. Ooh, I like that. And you are being called to go deeper in your soul growth or to increase your devotion by being a student of a lineage or a spiritual teacher. If you have already been a committed student, then you are being commended for your devotion. Your guides want you to know how proud of you they are and that the time you spend in devotion is priceless. If you are questioning your career or life path, your guides want you to turn to focus towards devotion and this prayer. Please use me in a way that delights my mind, body, and soul. May my life be one big moving prayer. Inner Temple. Devotion. Tune into the portal of your heart. That is this week's card. Okay, so jumping right into this week's episode. Last week I told you all the reasons why I don't offer mediumship as a job. And that conversation actually came about because as I was telling a few of my good friends this story. They were like, why don't you offer mediumship? Like, maybe you should be doing mediumship. I think this is your sign to be doing mediumship. And I was like, nope, 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 because these are my reasons. These are my 7 reasons why. And I feel very strongly about my reasons right now. Again, go back and listen to last week's episode if you want to know them. But this episode is all about mediumship and why I always will think it's amazing, it's beautiful, it's magical, it's special. I will love it forever. Do I want to do it every day, 5 days a week? No. So here's the story. It was my last client of the day, in-person Reiki. I do in-person Reiki in Banff, Alberta. And the person walked in and I was like, oh, hi, like you look familiar. And I said, have we met before? She was like, no. I was like, oh, we're at the Banff Wellness Retreat. She was like, no. I was like, oh. She's like, we've never met before. I was like, oh, you look so familiar. As an aside, I am starting to learn that this is part of my manual. So this is exactly what I mean when I say build your manual and figure out what it means to you. So I've recently noticed that if someone looks familiar to me and I've never met them, it's usually because I've seen their spirits in my head. So if I've ever met you and I said, oh, you look so familiar, and then they're like, we've never met before, and then usually my next thought is they look so much like their mom. Their mom has passed, I don't know them or their mom, and that's how I know that spirit is there. So it actually happened with my first client. I said, oh, you look so familiar, and she also said, we've never met before. And it ended up being that her mom was passed away. So then when this happened again, I was like, I think I just added something to my manual. If someone ever looks familiar, it's because I've seen their people in spirit. And I was actually just teaching at the Banff Wellness Retreat this past weekend. And there was this woman in the middle of the crowd. There was 80 people in the crowd. And I said, oh, hey. She was like looking around. I was like, oh, hi, like you, hi. She was like, I was like, welcome back. Like, nice to see you again. And she was like, huh? She's like, I've never been here before. And I was like, oh, I'm like, do we know each other? I'm like, you look so familiar. She's like, no. I was like, uh-oh, I know what that means. And for the whole rest of the hour and a half presentation, I couldn't look at her because I was like, this is spirit trying to get my attention by making people look familiar and then making me want to give messages to them. So that was embarrassing. So jumping back to this story, the lady walks in. I say, you look so familiar. She says, I don't know you. I say, okay. I ask her why she's here for Reiki. She's telling me that her friends have been telling her to come. She's had a really rough year. And her friends are like really, really pushing her to try Reiki. So she tried. She's here. And I said, okay, lay down. And as soon as she lay down, I'm like, oh, her parents are both passed away. I thought this in my mind. And then I guess I'll give you both perspectives. So I thought all of this in my mind to start. So she lays down. We're starting to do Reiki. She had just told me she had a very hard year. I instantly knew her mother passed away. And I was like, both her parents are passed away, though. And I was like, huh. So I'm thinking in my head, there's always this process of me thinking in my head, what am I going to do with this information? And then there was her dad who was standing, like, think of a triangle. He was standing on, like, the triangle with the 90 degrees. What's that triangle called? The right angle triangle. So if you think of a right angle triangle, dad was standing at the top of the triangle, and then mom was standing in the far corner. Like, they seemed to be standing far away from each other. So my initial thought was that dad passed a long time before mom. That's why they're standing far apart from each other. And I think she said that her friends had recommended me, and I was like, oh, like, do you know that I'm also a medium? And she was like, oh, yes, like, I also listen to your podcast. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, is it okay if we do a little mediumship? She was like, yes. I was like, sorry. I'm just getting a lot of information really fast. I was like, did you have a hard year because your mom passed away this year? She said, yes. I was like, you really look like your mom. Like, as soon as you walked in, I was like, you look really similar to your mom. She was like, yes. And then I was like, and your dad's also passed. And she's like, yes. And I'm like, but he passed way before your mom. Like, a long time ago, your dad passed. She was like, yes. I was like, within the last 10 years. She said, yes, 8 years ago. I said, okay. And then there was a pause. And then I started talking about something else about her mom. And she says to me, do you mean my bio mom or my adopted mom? She says, because I was adopted And I was like, oh, and I was like, are they both passed? She's like, yes, they both passed this year. And I was like, oh, I get the triangle now. I was like, your mom and dad are standing far away from each other. That's because it's your bio mom and your adopted dad. And then I was like, and your bio dad is still alive. So the adopted parents were standing in a line of the triangle. So dad was on top, mom was on the bottom because dad had passed first. And then the bio mom was in the other corner. So they were all part of the triangle. And I was like, oh, and I was like, and your bio dad is still alive? And she was like, yes. And I was like, okay. I was like, I see the three people. I see what they're trying to do here. I see what's going on. So I finally got it. So then I said, who's the C name? I'm hearing a C name. She's like, the C name is my bio dad. I'm like, okay, and bio dad is still alive. She's like, yes. I was like, okay, C name, bio dad. We have mom, bio mom, and dad in the triangle. Got it. I was like, and where's the three sisters come in? She's like, no way. I was like, what? Are you three sisters? Is this your mom trying to tell me she has three sisters? Who has three sisters? She said, literally a week ago, I found out that my bio mom had siblings. She's like, and I am one of three sisters. She's like, I have two other siblings. And I was like, oh. And I was like, but your bio mom kept those other two siblings, didn't they? And she was like, yes. And I was like, have you talked to them yet? She was like, no. And I was like, are you going to talk to them? She's like, I don't know. And I was like, ooh. I was like, I feel like you look like one of them a lot. Like there's two of you are going to be really similar and the other one maybe no, but the one's really like your mom and the other one's not. She's like, yeah, I had a feeling of that. And I was like, oh. She's like, how do you know all this? I'm like, I don't know. She's like, you're really accurate. And I was like, yeah, this is crazy. She's like, and I've been told that I look like my bio mom. She's like, so it's interesting that you keep saying that because all of this had just come to light. She's like, literally a week ago. And I was like, okay. I was like, so there's no accident that you're here today. So then we keep talking and I was like, okay, who do you want to talk to? She says, well, my mom, like my mom and my dad, like my adopted parents. And I was like, okay. She's like, they were my parents. And I was like, right. And then I was like, they didn't like talking about you being adopted, did they? And she was like, no. And I was like, I feel like my throat was closing up. Like they didn't want to talk about it. In their minds, you were theirs. There was never any other way to look at it. Like they're saying, you know, like you weren't an adopted child. You were their child. Like they didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to. She's like, no, we didn't talk about it. She's like, we never ever talked about it. I was like, that's how they're making me feel. Like my throat feels like I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about this bio mom adopt. Like, no, she was ours. She's like, yep, that's how it was. So then dad starts talking and I was like, your dad's showing me a rainy day. I was like, was it raining when he passed away? Like, I don't get, he's showing me like a rainy day. I'm seeing lots of rain. She was like, oh, she's like, it might be this photo that he has. She's like, it's a cowboy and it's a cowboy in rain. And it's the photo I used at his funeral. It's the one that I hang up of him. He always used to say, I'm that cowboy. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's probably why he's showing me, like, the rainy day. And then she's like, actually, now that I think about it, it was raining on the day that he died. I was like, okay, it could be, like, double meaning. She's like, how do you know that? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I'm usually not this good. I was like, holy cow. I was like, okay. And I was like, and did your dad die, like, within, like, the last 10 years? She was like, yeah, 8 years ago. And I was like, oh, did he die in November? She was like, yeah. And I was like, I'm hearing like the 10th. Like, did he die November 10th? She was like, well, he died on November 9th, but it was like right before midnight. Like, it was right before November 10th. And then we were both like, holy shit. Like, how did I know that? She's like, how did you know that? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I've never gotten someone's death date. Like, who died on November 10th? And she was like, he died right before midnight on the 9th. Anyway, so then I was like, all right, now your mom's talking and she's showing me like her toenails. I was like, did you paint her toenails? She's really wiggling her toes at me. I was like, she's really showing me her toenails. And she was like, that's so crazy. She was like 3 or 4 hours before she died. She's like, I painted her nails and her toes. She was like, that's crazy. And I was like, your mom's talking about, you know, something about her funeral. You were going back and forth. You were going back and forth. And you're like regretting the decision. And she's like, it's fine. She's like, everything was fine. And then I'm just seeing you going back and forth, back and forth. Something about her funeral. I was like, what is it about? And it took her a second to figure that one out. And then she was like, oh, she's like, I really wanted to do my mom's hair. She was like, but I didn't know if I should or I shouldn't or I should or I shouldn't. And she's like, and I didn't end up doing her hair. And I always wondered, is that a good thing to do? And I was like, oh, your mom's saying it's fine because she's waving her toenails at me. She's like, at least my toes were painted. She's like, yeah, her toes and nails did look good. I'm literally going through the note on my phone, writing down all the things that I remembered afterwards. Then I was like, did your parents live far away from you? She was like, yeah, they lived like in another town. I was like, okay, they're just showing me like the distance between you. And then I said, your dad is sitting down and just like eating pie. Like, did someone just like bring him dessert and he used to just sit in a chair and just like eat that dessert? I'm like, I feel like he didn't talk very much. He just would like sit in the chair and eat his dessert. She was like, yep, that's dad. He didn't have much to say. But then at the end, she's like, I'm surprised dad didn't talk more. And I was like, you literally told me that he doesn't say much. I was like, and mom had a lot to say today. She's like, yeah, that makes sense. And then we went back to mom. And I was like, do you have your mom's like long and dangly earrings? I was like, and were you like just wearing them like 2 days ago? And she like opened her eyes and sat up on the bed. She's like, yes. She's like, I literally took them off 2 days ago. She's like, how did you know that? She's like, those long dangly earrings from mom were like so important to me. And I was like, oh, I could just like kind of feel them around your ears, but it felt like you just took them off. And she was like, yes. She's like, that's so crazy. How do you know that? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I'm usually not this accurate. Like, it was just coming in so fast. And then I was like, I'm hearing chimes. I was like, do you have something that you're like, that you hang outside that like chimes in the wind? Like, you know, those wind makers or chime makers. And she was like, oh, I have like my mom's. I still have to hang it up though. And I was like, okay, hang it up because your mom's telling me like that's how she's going to come to visit. You know, when the wind blows and you hear those chimes, that's going to be her. She was like, okay, I have to, you know, hang him up. And then I was like, I keep hearing her giggle. Like I keep hearing like little yee. And then I was like, I hear her laugh. And I was like, she wants you to remember her laugh. She wants you to remember her giggle. She's like, yeah, that's my mom. Like, I remember that. I miss her laugh. And I was like, but at the end, like when she was passing, I'm like, I my throat hurts. I feel like I can't communicate. And she was like, yeah, at the end, like mom couldn't communicate. And I was like, oh, and I see like some sad eyes. I'm like, it feels like she was trapped in her eyes, like because she couldn't communicate with you. Like I feel like when you looked into her eyes, you like saw her trapped. She's like, yep. She's like, that's exactly how I felt when I looked in her eyes. And I was like, she's saying, don't remember that. She's saying, don't remember me like that. She's like, remember my giggle. She's like, don't remember my eyes. She's like, that was the end. That was the different part of it. And she was like, I know. She's like, it's hard to not remember those things. She's like, remember other things. She's like, remember the giggle, like put up the chimes. She's like, but don't remember like how she looked like it when she felt kind of trapped in her eyes. And then we started talking about, I'm like, you and your son, I'm like, you have a son? She's like, yes, I have two. And I'm like, what about the younger one? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, you two are linked. I was like, there's some type of energy going on. And she's like, yeah. I was like, did 3 bad things just happen to your son like in a row? Like he was like being thrown down a mountain and then like tripped and tripped and tripped. She's like, yep. I was like, did the 3rd bad thing happen yet? She was like, yep, it just happened. And I was like, okay. I was like, he's at the bottom of the mountain now. I'm like, he tripped his 3 times. She's like, oh, that's a relief. I'm like, he went through it. She was like, he went through it. I was like, he was thrown down that mountain. She was like, he was thrown down that mountain. I was like, but it's going to get better. I was like, but you two are linked in some type of way. She was like, yep, she knew that. And I was like, what happened 8 months ago? I'm like, something changed that happened 8 months ago. She was like, oh, 8 months ago, like we almost lost our house and like everything changed. And I was like, I was like, there's been a big shift in that last 8 months. Anyway, so we did this whole reading and then we got into a bunch of psychic information about our son, about what's going on in her life, what's going on in his life, the things to come, yada, yada, yada. And then when I was done talking, I got this intuitive hit to look up at the clock because my eyes were closed. I was like not doing Reiki, but talking to spirit. So I like was standing there and I looked at the clock. And I forget what time our session started, but say it started at 5 o'clock and it was 5:39. And I just like in my mind, we're going back to in my mind view, spirit was like, this could have been a 45-minute mediumship reading because it had been 39 minutes. And I was like, are you kidding me? And it was so quick and so fast. And the information just came like bam, 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 bam. And it was just like accurate, accurate, accurate. She was like, how do you know that? How do you know that? How do you know that? And I was like, I don't know. I'm usually not this good. I don't know. I'm usually not this good. And it was wild. And then I was like, spirit's teaching me a lesson. And then I got mad because they didn't respect my boundaries. But then I was also excited because it was such a like crazy messages, all the messages. And it was interesting. They were like, you could easily be doing 45-minute readings, was the message. So she had, I finished with 20 minutes of Reiki, which wasn't enough. I think I asked for 5 more minutes because we did 40 minutes of mediumship. And then we did a card pull and the whole thing. And she was just like, wow, that was amazing. She's like, that was so accurate. And I was like, yeah, that was a big lesson for me too. And I was like upset at the end of it because it was a mediumship reading. And then like I didn't get to do all the Reiki I wanted to do, but I was also happy that she received all those messages. But it was the same way I've been feeling for years. I felt half and half. I felt here and there. I felt like it wasn't mediumship. It wasn't Reiki. It was a mix of both. But that was a lot of mediumship. And I called my friend right after work and I was like, why did this happen? Why are they doing this to me? What are they trying to show me? What's the lesson? I made my decision. What am I still needing to learn? Are they double checking? Like, I just don't get it. She was like, that's beautiful. This is amazing. I'm like, I know it's beautiful and amazing, but I'm like, what's the lesson? Why is this happening? So that's how episode 191 came about. Because through that conversation, I was explaining to her all the reasons why I don't want to do mediumship as a job. I was like, I'm tired, I'm sweaty, blah, 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 blah. I'd have to change my prices. I was like, is that the lesson? So I think there was a lot of lessons wrapped up into it. And I think it was a big reminder that if you wanted to do this, spirit would be so freaking accurate and fast. And 45 minutes would be perfect. And it felt so complete and it felt so amazing with all of these pieces of information that came through and validation and messages. And it was just incredible. And at the end of it, I had to ask, I was like, what was the thing? And I was like, for you today, what was the thing that you knew that we were talking to your parents? She was like, the dangly earrings. She's like, the dangly earrings. She's like, I just took those off. She's like, it's crazy that you said that. I knew it was my mom. And it warms my heart and I love it. And I was so happy. I was like, I usually don't talk about work with my friends, but I went home that day. I texted all my friends and I said, I just had the craziest reading that ambushed my Reiki session. But I was trying to explain this podcast in a 10-word text. And I was like, I knew that he died on November 10th. I think spirits just likes to come in and remind me, double check, ask me is it time now, Steph? The answer is no, but I like that they ask and check in, and it was a beautiful thing. And I do believe that this person really, really needed that message. I think that it was all part of that healing session. I believe it was part of the Reiki. I believe it was part of the release. I just think, and everything that led her to booking with me, all her friends telling me how she ended up finding me, how she ended up booking with me, the day that she ended, I just think it was so much divine timing that it was no accident. Nothing is ever an accident. But at the end of it, I was like, this is going to be a podcast episode. I hope you know. I was like, that was too freaking good. She was like, yeah. She's like, I was like, I got to write all this down because I'm going to forget because, you have amnesia afterwards. So this is me bringing it to the pod so that you guys can hear. Mediumship's amazing. Spirit's amazing. I don't think I had one no the entire reading. Everything that I said fit. And that's very, very rare. In mediumship, it's normal to have a no. It's normal to have a misinterpretation. It's normal not to understand something fully. But this was just bam, bam, bam. Yes, yes. How'd you know that? How'd you know that? I don't know. So that's my crazy mediumship story, the accuracy. November 10th, he died on the 9th, right before midnight. Oof. All right. Their parents did a good job, everybody. So I hope you like that story. Back with the mediumship story, throwing it back. I used to do these all the time. But this one was good. I still actually do them all the time. I think in my mind I don't. But every few weeks I'm always like, I have a good mediumship story for the middlers. Gotta tell you guys. All right, everybody. That's it for this week. I'll leave all the links you need down below in the show notes if you want to book in with me for Reiki or PSYCH-K. In person or virtually if you want to register for the business workshop happening this Saturday, October 21st. All the links will be down below. I appreciate your rating and reviews. It helps the podcast grow. But until next Wednesday, middlers, when I see you in your ears, I hope you have a wonderful week. Bye, everybody.